Prepare yourself, because what you're about to read will redefine everything you thought you knew about loyalty. This is the moment everything shattered. Leona was watering her row of vibrant succulents on the kitchen windowsill. That's it. That's how it started. After nearly 4 decades of shared mornings and whispered secrets, the truth arrived. Not with the explosive crackle of a thunderstorm, not with a torrent of tears or ear-splitting screams, but with the quiet drip of water onto thirsty soil. The dawn broke in its usual, unremarkable fashion. The neighborhood's resident hound still hadn't mastered the art of ignoring squirrels. And there I was, Warren Ashford, a man of 66, standing in the archway of our living room, clad only in socks, stifling a yawn, vaguely listening to the morning news report. Then, Liana spoke, her voice level, almost conversational. I cheated on you years ago. You don't need to say anything. I want to say it out loud before I die. No theatrics, no tremor of emotion in her tone. Just a simple, chilling fact released into the air, as if it held no more weight than a feather. And then she returned to tending her succulents, meticulously misting a jade plant. At first I thought she was attempting one of her dry, almost morbid jokes, the kind that always felt a little off-key. But when Liana looked up at me, her clear hazel eyes held no trace of humor. I managed a single choked word. When? She didn't flinch. When we lived in that pale blue house with the climbing roses. That was 30 years ago. 30 years. I felt a cold sweat break out on my palms. A strange, pathetic laugh, a sound like gravel catching in my throat, escaped me. I asked, was it just once? She simply shook her head, one slow, deliberate shake of her head. That's when I slumped onto the antique armchair, staring numbly at the intricate pattern of the Persian rug. Suddenly, the familiar threads seemed to shift, to rearrange themselves into an alien landscape. The very walls of our home felt like staged backdrops, as if I'd been living on a meticulously crafted set directed by someone else entirely. Liana dried her hands on a soft linen towel and calmly placed the succulent mister back on the sill, as if she hadn't just plunged a rusty blade into the center of my chest and dragged 3 decades of buried history into the harsh light. She said his name was Marcus. She'd met him at a photography class she'd started attending on Saturday mornings, a pursuit I had heartily encouraged, believing she needed a creative outlet. He was unattached, charismatic, and noticeably younger. She confessed she'd gotten lost in the sheer novelty of his attention, that he made her feel truly seen again. And then she added, I stopped it before it could become something worse, but it still happened. I still lied. She claimed it had been slowly consuming her. Funny, because now it was consuming me. 30 years, and I had been utterly oblivious. We had built an entire existence together. We raised 2 children, weathered job losses, mourned parents, celebrated countless anniversaries. And all that time she carried this secret, this fundamental truth I was denied. Now at 66, I'm left wrestling with the terrifying question. What else do I not know? She asked if I hated her. I didn't answer, because the crushing truth was, I didn't even know who I was supposed to be hating. That night I couldn't eat. Not dinner, not even a simple cracker, not a single sip of water. I sat in the window seat, the television flickering silently, a chaotic montage of images I couldn't process. Liana came in twice, once to ask if I was coming to bed. I remained silent. The second time, she gently draped a knitted throw over the back of my chair and whispered, I'm truly sorry. Then she walked upstairs. I don't know why that barely audible whisper stung worse than the original confession. Perhaps it was because it sounded like she expected forgiveness, as if the chasm that had opened between us was merely a slight bruise. I tried desperately to convince myself it was ancient history, that people evolve, make mistakes, and ultimately choose who they want to be with, that she chose me in the end. But every time I almost swallowed that bitter pill, another thought rose to punch me in the throat. I never had the chance to react when it truly mattered. I never got to confront the betrayal in real time. I never had a choice. And somehow knowing that made it feel infinitely worse. At around 3 in the morning, I opened our old leather-bound memory chest. I don't know why. Maybe I sought to anchor myself in a version of our life that felt immutable, real. But as I stared at the faded photographs, Liana's radiant smile, my hand clutching hers as if she were my entire world, all I saw now were cracks, forced grins, a future I had walked into utterly blindfolded. Then I saw it, a familiar face. Marcus. Yes, he had been there. Not front row, but close enough. He'd signed our guest book. "Wishing you a lifetime of joy," it read. I wanted to tear the page from its binding. Could a single photograph hold the key to unlocking a decade-spanning deception? The answer will shock you. In the morning, I watched Liana move through the kitchen like nothing had happened, pouring cereal, humming a light tune, her silk robe tied casually at the waist. She noticed me standing in the living room archway and remarked, "I didn't sleep much. I figured you didn't either." No apology this time. No lingering guilt in her tone, just observations, as if we had reverted to being polite, domestic roommates. I finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me when it happened?" Her answer was immediate, devoid of hesitation. "Because I didn't want to lose the life we were building." That hit me like a solid brick. So, she kept me ensnared in a lie to preserve her own comfort? I asked her, "Did you love him?" Her silence stretched, long and suffocating. I thought she hadn't heard me, but she had. She just took her time delivering the final blow. "I thought I might have back then, but it faded. It wasn't real." Wasn't real. I walked out of the room before I could utter something irreversible. I retreated to the potting shed behind the house, sat in my old garden chair, and just existed in the quiet. That's when I saw it, tucked away in an old drawer. A faded snapshot I hadn't looked at in years. The four of us. Liana, me, Aubrey, and Grant, at Coral Cove. Her arm was around me in that picture. And now I had to wonder, was it wrapped around Marcus in her head? The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was Liana's maddeningly composed calm, which she carried around like a perfectly pressed handkerchief. She had confessed, and now she was simply done with it. Like someone ticking off an item from a lengthy to-do list. I was the one left behind, emotionally barefoot in a room strewn with broken glass, and she had the audacity to act as though the healing had already begun for both of us. That afternoon, I stayed away from the house. I drove aimlessly, circling unfamiliar neighborhoods, parking outside nondescript strip malls, observing people who had no idea I was silently unraveling inside my aging sedan. I ended up behind the old municipal park where our children once played. The swing set was empty, the familiar yellow slide still there. The one Aubrey had tumbled from when she was 8. The same day Liana had taken her for ice cream while I waited in the ER. It was ironic. I used to think that day exemplified how well we functioned as a team. Now I wondered if it had merely been convenience, a well-rehearsed performance. I called my younger brother Calvin. He lives 2 states away and works incessantly. We aren't close, but I needed to articulate the words aloud. I told him Liana had confessed something monumental, that she'd cheated decades ago with someone I had once considered a friend. There was a prolonged pause, then he asked, "Is she cheating now?" I replied, "No." He sighed. Then, "What do you want to do?" I didn't know. I hated that, the not knowing. "I'm 66, Calvin," I said, my voice rough. "I don't start over. I don't crash on couches. I don't swipe on dating apps. I clip coupons and overwater houseplants and rewatch the same 6 documentaries on the History Channel. This was supposed to be the stage of life where everything settled. But now I felt like I was free-falling through a past I had never authorized. When I returned home, she was in the garden, kneeling in the rich earth, pulling weeds with a quiet intensity, as if the very foundation of our marriage hadn't just been violently ripped open. I stood at the back door watching her. She looked utterly at peace. Her hands were caked with soil, her brow furrowed in concentration, her lips moving softly as though conversing with the plants. When she finally noticed me, she waved me over, and I, like an utter fool, walked out to her. She said, "I want you to ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth this time." The truth, this time. That phrase struck me like a physical blow because it unequivocally meant everything else had been a lie. She said I could ask her anything. So I did. Without a second thought, I blurted out, "Was there ever anyone else besides Marcus?" There was no hesitation. She didn't need to search for the answer. Her mouth twitched, as if it had been waiting for that very question. Then she nodded just once. There was a second man. That was when the numbness finally fractured. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard my teeth grind. I demanded, "Who?" She looked up at me from the dirt, as if I was the unreasonable one. She said she didn't want to give me his name, that it wouldn't matter anymore. "It matters to me," I almost shouted. "You don't know him. It was in Vermont during that writing retreat I went on, the year after your dad died." The Vermont writing retreat. I remembered it vividly. I had stayed home, adrift in grief, drinking too much, pretending I was coping. Liana had claimed she needed creative space to clear her head. She was gone for 10 days. I had even helped her pack. I kissed her goodbye in our driveway and told her I hoped she'd find inspiration in the mountains. Apparently, she'd found it in someone else's bed. I don't recall what I said next. I think I just turned around and stumbled back into the house. My ears were ringing again. This time, it wasn't from shock. It was from a quiet, simmering rage that genuinely frightened me. I don't get angry easily. I grew up swallowing it. But something inside me was clawing at the edges of my throat. I went to my study desk and pulled out the old photo albums. Not because I wanted to relive anything, but because I had to view them now through this horrifying new lens. I found pictures from the Vermont trip. She was smiling at everyone, relaxed, radiant, like someone on the precipice of falling in love. She had that faraway gleam in her eyes, a look I used to believe meant she was composing poetry in her head. Turns out, she was probably rehearsing lies. Later that night, she came upstairs and knocked softly on the bedroom door. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not simply because I was angry, but because I genuinely didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't want her voice contaminating the fragile silence. She whispered through the door, "I told you because I respect you." I almost laughed aloud. Respect. She called 37 years of deception respect. And yet, I still couldn't bring myself to tell her to leave. The next morning, I stared at my reflection for what felt like hours. Not out of vanity, believe me. There's nothing flattering left about a 66-year-old man whose world has just collapsed. But because I was looking for signs, clues, a weakness, maybe something in my face that screamed, "Of course she cheated." But all I saw was an exhausted man with too many lines on his forehead and a toothbrush that suddenly felt like it didn't belong to him. I skipped breakfast. Liana didn't ask why. She just sipped her tea and read her book, acting like we were a normal couple easing into retirement. I couldn't take it. I walked into the potting shed and opened every dusty box we hadn't touched in years. Boxes from when the kids moved out, from when we renovated the basement. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I think I just needed to feel like I was in control of something. That's when I found the old briefcase. It was tucked beneath obsolete tax returns and yellowed wrapping paper, a black, zippered case with a worn red tab. I recognized it instantly. It was from the year she started journaling again. She used to say writing helped her process emotions. I had never once read her journals. I thought it would be disrespectful. Now, though, respect felt like a currency I couldn't afford to give. I opened it. The first few entries were harmless, mundane, grocery lists disguised as inner monologue. Then slowly, it shifted. I recognized the date, February 12th, our anniversary. The entry began. "He brought me roses again. He always means well, but I feel like I'm disappearing." I kept reading. Each page chipped away at me. Her words were soft, yet brutal. "He kisses me like it's routine. I miss being wanted." Another page. "Marcus looks at me like I'm still bright, like I matter." She wrote about their encounters, not graphically. Liana wasn't that kind of writer, but emotionally, deeply. She described the sound of his voice, how he made her laugh mid-sentence, how she felt alive again. That word repeated itself. Alive, alive, alive. Was I dead to her all those years? And then one entry made my chest seize. "If Warren ever found out, I wonder if he'd even fight for me." I closed the briefcase. My hands were trembling. Not from betrayal this time, but from a gut-wrenching recognition. because she was right. I never fought for her. Not really. I just existed beside her, like wallpaper. And now I wasn't sure who I hated more, her or myself. 2 days after finding the journal, I decided to venture into the basement storage room. Not for anything specific, but because it was the last part of the house that still felt untouched. Like maybe the truth hadn't reached it yet. There's something unsettling about climbing a creaky wooden ladder into a dusty space filled with forgotten holiday decorations and baby clothes. It feels like stepping into a graveyard of who you used to be. I found a box labeled Warren's University Mementos. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside were old notebooks, some Polaroids, and a bundle of cards tied with twine. Most of them were from Liana. I untied the string slowly. One of the cards was dated a few months before we got engaged. It said, "I think I'm almost ready to leave the past behind. Maybe this is the right forever, after all." At the time, I thought she meant an old breakup. Now I'm not so sure. But that's not what broke me. What broke me was the envelope hidden behind the cards. A small one, yellowed with age, sealed and unmarked. I opened it and pulled out a photo, a sonogram. My chest locked up. We had 2 children, Aubrey and Grant, both planned, both cherished. This one wasn't either of them. I stared at the image, trying desperately to decipher the date in the corner. It was from the second year of our marriage, long before we even talked seriously about starting a family. I flipped the photo over. In Liana's familiar handwriting, it said, "I'm sorry I couldn't keep this secret and the baby too." I sat there in the basement, unable to move, breathing in dust and betrayal. She hadn't just cheated. She'd been pregnant, and she never told me. Was it his? Did she end it because of the pregnancy? Did she get rid of it without telling me? Or did something happen? A miscarriage? I didn't know. I still don't. What if the ghosts of the past aren't just memories, but unwritten futures? The revelation lurking in this dusty box was about to rewrite everything. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of the bedroom and asked her straight out, "Did you get pregnant by him?" She froze. Her face didn't fall. It calcified, like she'd prepared for this moment but prayed it would never arrive. She didn't deny it. Instead, she said, "I thought I could carry it and make you believe it was yours. But I lost it, and I was relieved. I hated myself for that. I still do." The room spun, not just from anger, but from the sheer weight of decades of falsehoods. My entire concept of love, trust, fatherhood, it all blurred into something murky and unrecognizable. She asked if I wanted her to leave. I didn't answer because what do you say to a woman who buried this much under the foundation of your marriage and then handed you the shovel? I didn't sleep that night, not for a single minute. I just sat on the edge of the bed like a ghost in his own house, listening to Liana breathe softly beside me, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The woman I built my life around had quietly destroyed its very foundation while I was busy believing we were solid. My hands were trembling as I did this. What would you do if your entire life felt like a carefully constructed lie? At sunrise, I packed a small bag. I wasn't leaving permanently. At least I didn't think I was. I just needed to breathe somewhere that didn't reek of betrayal. I drove to the remote fishing shack, my late grandfather's cabin, 2 hours away. I hadn't been there in years, but I still had a spare key tucked under the wooden fish carving on the porch. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I could finally exhale. It was musty, cold, unloved, but honest. I made coffee on the old gas stove and sat at the table, staring out at the water. I kept wondering how long I had been a background character in my own marriage. Was I just convenient for her, a safe option while she lived a secret life in the margins? That afternoon, my daughter Aubrey called. She'd heard from Liana that I needed space. I tried to sound normal, but I guess I failed, because her voice sharpened. "Dad, what's going on?" I told her I couldn't explain yet, that I would, just not now. She was quiet for a long beat, then said something I'll never forget. "You know, Mom was always really good at hiding when she was hurting. I wonder if she got just as good at hiding other things too." That sentence haunted me because Aubrey had no idea what had actually transpired, and yet she intuitively knew something had always been off. I stayed at the cabin for 3 days. Liana only texted once. I'm here when you're ready to talk. I don't want to lose you, even if I deserve to. I didn't reply, not because I was punishing her, but because I genuinely didn't know if there was anything left to salvage. I kept thinking about the life we had built, the family dinners, the Christmas mornings, the inside jokes. How many of those moments were genuinely real? How many were meticulously staged? On the third night, I woke up in a cold sweat from a dream where I was walking through our house. But every room was utterly empty. Just drywall and nails, nothing on the walls, no furniture, no signs of life. When I reached the bedroom in the dream, Liana was sitting on the floor, smiling serenely. And then she said, "You built all of this for us, Warren. I just never asked you to." I came home on the fourth day, not because I had all the answers, or because some dramatic revelation had changed everything, but because the silence stopped feeling like strength and started feeling like fear. Fear of being utterly alone. Fear of letting anger turn into festering bitterness. Fear that I'd spend the rest of my life measuring everything against a past I could never change. When I walked through the front door, Liana was in the living room, sitting on the couch with her hands clasped in her lap. No music playing, no TV on, just her waiting. I sat down across from her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. And then I asked her the one question I'd been consciously avoiding. Why didn't you leave me back then? Her eyes filled with tears. Because even in the middle of all my mess, you were still the only person who saw me as worth saving. And I didn't want to give that up. That revelation should have made me angrier, but it didn't. It just broke something open in me. I wasn't ready to forgive her, not completely, but I was tired of carrying the crushing weight of betrayal without asking myself why I'd been so blind for so long. We talked for hours about everything, not just the affairs, but the emptiness, the lost years, the times we both drifted and didn't say a single word. There were tears, some raised voices, some surprising laughter that caught us both off guard. And somewhere in that painful, chaotic mess, we found a thread. A thin, fragile thread of something that still felt like love. Not the fairy tale kind. Not the flawless storybook version, but the kind that survives wreckage. The kind you rebuild slowly, with scarred hands and hesitant hope. It's been 3 months since that night. We're in counseling now. We go for walks more often. We hold hands again, not out of habit, but because it still genuinely matters. There are moments when I look at her and feel the sting of the past, but there are more moments now when I look at her and feel a quiet peace. She told me the truth. I stood there like a fool, but I stayed, and somehow that's where the healing began. Now tell me, what's a truth you uncovered that redefined your understanding of someone you thought you knew? Share your thoughts below.